So I, of course, am John Spence. This is Mike Gelfgot. Thank you for coming to our presentation. It's called David and Goliath. And Mike is going to introduce me.
Yes, I will introduce my buddy, John Spence. There's three things you guys need to know about John Spence. One, he's an incredible, absolutely magical joke teller. For instance, a bear walks into a bar and asks the bartender, "Hey, bartender, can I get a beer?" The bartender's like, "What'd you say?" "Can I get a beer?" The bartender's like, "Yeah, but why the long pause?" It's that kind of stuff.
Leave the joke telling to
For
me.
17 years, he's been telling.
You butchered it. It's why the big pause.
Yeah.
It's when the horse walks in, you say, "Why the long face?"
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
But this is the stuff that I get to hear for 17 years. And I don't always tell it very well. That's why I think he's an incredible, magical joke teller. But in all seriousness, two things about John. One, in 2008, he won the Club Operator of the Year award, which is one of the most prestigious awards you can win within the Anytime Fitness franchise, which I think is pretty amazing. Never didn't see anything like it. And when it comes to business, this is interesting. He's right 99.9% of the time in every aspect of business. I don't know how he knows things. But he knows things. He knows things about things, and I'm not sure why he knows, but he knows. It's 99.9, and it's incredible. And number two, one thing you guys need to know about John, he's got a big heart. He's got a big heart, and to date, he has helped raise $150,000 for an organization called Safe Passage, which is an organization for battered women and children. And in 2015, he was recognized on the national stage at Anytime Fitness for the particular work that he's done with that organization. So I think we should give him a round of applause.
Thank you. You're too kind. You know, obviously, it's so much easier when somebody else talks about you. So this is me talking about Mike Gelfgot. Mike has a really great resume. You know, you're going to hear from us today. We're going to talk about our partnership and how it goes back over 15 years. And he's got all these different accolades, but we wanted to talk about just a couple. There's a couple of firsts here that are really impressive. Number one, there's this whole phenomenon when you're an Anytime Fitness franchisee. If you haven't figured that out by now, I know many of you are Anytime Fitness people like we are. If you're an Anytime Fitness franchisee, there's this whole phenomenon of getting tattoos. You get the Running Man tattoo. We actually have, who's got one in the room? Isn't that great? I mean, here's mine right there, right? It's a phenomenon that was started many years ago, and the very first Anytime Fitness tattoo, there are thousands of them worldwide now. You go to the Anytime Fitness conference in almost every country, they have a tattoo artist there. The very first Anytime Fitness tattoo, Running Man tattoo, was 2004, Mr. Mike Gelfgot, and it's verified many places in books, Wikipedia. He's got it.
It's only relevant this year within the Anytime world, really.
It's a big, I mean, you're a trendsetter is really what you are, right? Cool guy. You're a bit of a cool guy. All right, the other first that I think is really not as quite as dubious, has a lot more meat to it, is when Mike and I first got involved with Anytime Fitness, the business was membership sales. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today when we talk about David versus Goliath. In the beginning, we were just strictly membership sales. Now when we started, I met Mike. I was the manager of a big box fitness center in Cincinnati, and Mike was a personal trainer. So for our business, from day one, membership and personal training were working together. But the overall franchise that we were involved with, Anytime, they said, stop talking to the other franchisees about personal training. They can't even figure out membership. Why are you talking about personal training? We always felt from day one that those two things need to work synergistically, right? Well, after about 5 years of Mike just continuing to preach about the importance of running a quality personal training program within a facility, they finally relented and they said, you know what, this needs to be not only something important, but we need to make it a big part of our business model, and actually started giving an award away. So the very first Anytime Fitness Personal Trainer of the Year out of thousands of Anytime Fitness trainers was again, he was the first, Mr. Mike Gelfgot. A round of applause for that. But what I think is actually more interesting about that, so Anytime Fitness, about 2,600 locations maybe in the US, the number is updated all the time. Every location has a couple of trainers. Some have a lot of trainers. We had locations that had 5 or 6 trainers. So there's thousands of Anytime Fitness trainers. What's more interesting to me isn't that Mike won the Personal Trainer of the Year award for this franchise. What it was after he won it, the family of clubs that we operated, the system that Mike built, our job responsibilities were always broken down into I oversaw the membership side of the business and the overall vision of the business. Mike oversaw the personal training, coaching side of the business. After Mike won the award, 3 more people on our team of clubs subsequently won that same award in competition with thousands of clubs. So that legacy that he established. So he won the award in 2012, and then people that he trained, people that he coached, won the award in 2013, 2016, and just this last year, we had the very first female Anytime Fitness Personal Trainer of the Year win it in 2018, and that was all the legacy of Michael Gelfgot. So. I nailed it?
Good. Let's move on.
It's good stuff. All right. It's always interesting when somebody's talking about you right in front of you. All right. So who are John Spence and Mike Gelfgot? We're business partners. Obviously, you can see that. We operated at one point 23 Anytime Fitness clubs in Indiana and Ohio, and we had 1 location in Michigan. So from 2004 to 2018, we opened 12 brand new Anytime Fitness locations. We purchased 11 Anytime Fitness locations, and then we had a lot of people that we started with that were in the same boat as us when we first got started, single club owners. They owned 1 club, and they had the same kind of dreams that we had, that we were going to scale up our business over a number of years. And then when we look back, and we'd won all the different awards, I talked about some of those. When we looked back 15 years later, many of our cohorts from those original days, they still only had 1 or 2 locations, or many of them had phased out of the business. They hit a point and they never grew, they never expanded, they didn't scale up their business. So this forced us many years later to ask ourselves why. Why was it that we were able to scale up our business from 1 location? We didn't have any money, right? Everything we did along the way, we purchased with cash, right? Why is it that we were able to grow this business and so many of our peers just stagnated? And the answer was we just never stopped learning. And that's really what this session today is about how we learned. So we had several different, by the way, if you're wondering if Mike is going to get a chance to talk, I learned a long time ago that if I ever co-present with Mike, I got to get all of my stuff in quickly, because as soon as I turn this clicker over to him, there's a good chance I won't get another chance to talk. So we never stopped learning, and there were several books along the way, and a lot of the other Anytime Fitness owners, like Kenny was just asking me, Kenny works at a club in Washington State, he was just asking me like what my favorite books are. Like, we're really known as those guys who read all of the books, right? So we had a few books. I'm going to give you just a quick snippet of our reading list, the most profound books that really changed the way I thought about business over the years. One of them we're going to talk about today, but I'll just take you through the different books that I think are really important for shaping our culture and our business. The first one was a book called Good to Great by Jim Collins. If you haven't read this guy does wonderful research. The best thing about Jim Collins is he's not one of these authors that just says, this is what I think. He backs everything up with a ton of data, right? And this really helped me shape compensation plans. It helped me look at marketing different. And it gave me faith in the systems that we were running. And to this day, this is probably the #1 business book I've ever read. The next one was The E-Myth. Many of you are single club operators. Many of you just run 1 business. And this is the guy, Dr. Michael Gerber, the author of this book. He's the guy who coined the expression, stop working in your business and learn to work on your business. So that was, you hear people say that all the time. The first book that was ever in was Dr. Michael Gerber's book, The E-Myth, right? The next book is probably my favorite read out of all of these. Tribal Leadership. Tribal Leadership, you hear a lot of people talk about how to build culture, right? It's important that you have culture in your club. Like, do you have the right culture in your business? Does your boot camp have the right culture in it? But people don't really give you a playbook for what that means. A common misconception a lot of people will have is there's either no culture or strong culture, and that's never the truth. The truth is there's always culture, But the question is, are you building that culture, or is it a culture that is just built on its own that you have no control over? If you ever really want to understand how to build culture inside of a business, this is the book, Tribal Leadership. And that brings us to the fourth book. And that's what this seminar is based on today. It's David versus Goliath. And as our careers changed and we saw a few different things happening in the fitness industry and happening in our business, this book became probably one of the most important in our transformation.
Yes, so Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called David and Goliath. Sorry, maybe I'm loud. He wrote a book called David and Goliath. What's interesting about the book is this. He tells a story about David, how David beat Goliath, the true story, which is really interesting. And David beat Goliath for three different reasons. One, David beat Goliath because he was fighting David's way. People try to beat Goliath fighting Goliath's way. Well, he's a giant. He's 9 foot tall and very muscular. Hand-to-hand combat would not work with a guy like that. David knew that. He beat Goliath fighting David's way. 2, David beat Goliath fighting him in a very non-conventional way. Everyone else that fought Goliath, they try to beat him with a sword, a shield, or some sort of not an arrow,
Spear?
Spear, that's it, or a shield. It's not going to work with a guy who's 9 foot tall. 3, David beat Goliath fighting Goliath very differently. So how does this relate to business? Well, in 2015, we got our essentially teeth knocked back when we had a Goliath that moved into our market. And we looked to see what was happening in our business, and for a year, we tried to fight that Goliath's way, and it didn't work. So we started asking ourselves a higher quality questions, and we figured out some non-conventional, different ways to beat and thrive against this particular Goliath, which is what we'll get into in this presentation.
So we saw the industry changing right in front of our eyes. In the last probably 5 years, I had personally, as a fitness professional that's been in some way, shape, or form in the fitness business for over 20 years, I saw more change in the last 5 years than I'd seen in the 15 years before that. And there's a lot of reasons for why that happened. So we saw this changing right in front of us. So we knew that we had to change as well. You know why? Because we were reading the books. We're like, well, the books say that we have to adapt, we have to pivot, we have to figure something out, right? So we're reading this book. And I was at an all-company meeting. So when we sold our company, and if you haven't picked up on that, we sold 20 of our locations last year, and in June of last year, we're coming up on 1 year. Before we sold our company, we had about 160 employees, and I don't know, about 75, 80 were personal trainers, and administrative staff, and club managers, and salespeople. And at one of our company meetings, I got a question that I really wasn't prepared for, and it was this question. You've probably heard a similar question. We passed around a basket, and people could just anonymously put a card in there with whatever question. So in front of all 150 of my staff members, I start reading through these questions, just giving candid responses. So one of the questions was, all right, John, you're the smart guy. You're supposed to know all this stuff. So we just had a club open that's brand new. It's 5 times the size of our club. All the equipment in the club is brand new. They have more types of equipment than we have. They're also open 24 hours, and they're a quarter of the price that we are. How do you expect to compete with that? How are you going to expect to compete with that, right? And at the time, I was kind of, giving the same company line that we'd been given, which was, you know what, we're going to out-care them. We're gonna care more, right? And that's a great slogan, right? We're gonna care more than they do. We're going to build better connections. We're gonna have better relationships with them. But then Mike talked about it. We kind of got our teeth kicked in for a solid year, and we started to look at the scale of our company in 20 plus locations. We're like, all right, this is happening at one of our locations, and we see this happening in other locations to other Anytime Fitness owners and other small, our fitness centers are around 5,000, 6,000 square feet. We see this happening to other contemporaries in our business. What are we gonna do? So the answer is we don't compete with them. The answer is simply that we change. The answer is, for the first year, you're right. We absolutely tried to fight Goliath Goliath's way. We stopped fighting Goliath's way, right? Now, this is really interesting. We're all running fitness centers, right? You know, and to us, it's very serious. But if you take this analogy of David versus Goliath on a more macro level, and you look at it, and probably on our planet, the most macro level that you could have, that would be wars between two types of countries, right? A very powerful country and what they would consider a smaller, weaker country, right? I'm going to ask you, anybody here know that if two countries wage a war against each other, and one is larger than the other, does anyone care to take a guess at what percentage of the time the large country wins the war? Percent. 70? Did I tell you, Mark, about this presentation already? You're pretty close. All right. But I'm gonna take it a step further. Who wins, a big country or a small country? What if the big country has an army or a military power that's at least 10 times the size of the smaller country? All right, this is a true David and Goliath scenario. So you've got this big country military power that's at least 10 times the size. How often does that big country win? And you actually are very close. And the number is 71.5% of the time the big country wins. So if I had a lollipop, I would give it to you right now, but I don't. Michael will have to owe you. So 71% of the time. And of course, the magic is not the 71%. Nobody cares about the 71.5% because we would always assume that the bigger country has all the advantages. So what we want to dissect and find out about is the other 28.5% of the time. And guess what? We don't have to do the research because guess what? There's another book, of course. Of course there's another book, all right? There's a political scientist from Cambridge that did a study in 2005. The reason I know about this book is because it was referenced in Malcolm Gladwell's book. You can buy this on Amazon. But Malcolm Gladwell references this, and he talks about two different military powers facing off against each other and who wins, right? So his name was Ivan Arwin-Toft, and he looked at what he called asymmetrical conflict. Those were conflicts that involved a big military power and a small military power that was 1/10 of the size. And he found some very, very interesting things. So he started in the year 1800, and he went right up until he was publishing the book. He published the book in 2005. So he took from 1800 to 2003. He analyzed 200 different conflicts. So I just showed you what the percentages were when the big country takes on a small country 71.5% of the time. He defined these different types of countries as a strong actor, that's the big country with the big military power, and he defined the smaller one as the weak actor or the small actor. Here's what he found. Well, here's the one I showed you before, 71.5%. If we look at, let me back up, I got a little bit ahead of myself there. If we look at how you fight these wars, right? If you stop fighting Goliath Goliath's way and you use unconventional warfare, and unconventional warfare would be things like ambushes, sabotage, raids, petty warfare, those are small skirmishes instead of big battles. When we're thinking about conventional warfare, we're thinking about conventional air battles, sea battles, land battles, where two military forces meet really on a battlefield. Well, if we look at things like hit and run tactics, who has the advantage there, right? Typically the smaller force, right? And mobility, the ability to strike over here, and because you're a smaller force, go strike someplace else. So when Arwin-Toft looked at these military battles, and he looked at when the small player, when the Davids, if you will, stopped playing by the big rules, what he found was, I think I've got a laser pointer here. If they played by the same rules, the number actually gets worse. Remember, it was 71.5. If David decided to fight Goliath by the Goliath strategies, it actually got worse. About 77% of the time, the big country won. But look at this. This is a magical number right here in my eyes. When David stopped fighting Goliath, when the small actor or the weak actor stopped fighting the wars the way that the big government and big military wanted to, they actually put the odds in their favor, and it became 64% chance. Not only did they shave the odds, but they actually put the odds in their favor using tactics like ambushes and hit and run tactics. So we looked at that and we said, well, gosh, in our business, of course, what are those tactics that we can use that are like ambushes and hit and run and other guerrilla tactics? So you got to ask yourself, in your market, who is your Goliath? For us, if you haven't put it together by now, it was places, low-cost competitors like Planet Fitness, like Crunch Fitness, established chains, because we're running gyms. All of this stuff is relative. Your Goliath might be a little bit different than my Goliath, but we all have different Goliaths. Who else could it possibly be? And think about who, of course, your Goliath is. If you run a studio or a boutique, gosh, maybe Anytime Fitness to some of those people was the Goliath in their market. We thought, actually, we were very arrogant about it. We thought we were the Goliath in some of our markets before we got our butts handed to us. Yeah. Online personal training, of course, could be your Goliath right now. Other studios and boutiques could be your Goliath. Who else?
And what's interesting to note about the tactics itself, that's the stuff that gave me a tremendous amount of hope to say, okay, if a military can win the odds against a military that's 10 times more powerful, like what can we do at our local center? And so then we started thinking really, really differently. But before we get into how we started thinking, let's talk about the fitness business in general. And these are numbers from, this is up to 2016. The numbers are actually bigger now. As of 2018, there's close to 60 million members that are members of gyms. Josh Levy, I don't know if you guys went to his event yesterday. He says there's over, well, actually, I'll get into that here in a minute. But so think about this, right? So the industry is growing. And the question that I have, well, if it's growing, where are they going? Because I looked at our membership base and was actually declining. We were actually seeing fewer and fewer members, but the reports are telling me we have more and more and more members that are in the fitness business. So where are they going? And this is what I wanted to bring up Josh Levy. Josh Levy says there's over 100,000 different types of studios that are out in the market. That's unbelievable. So if you take a look at the 2015, 2016 stats, that's the biggest growth in the fitness sector where people went and joined places, studios, boutiques, right? The second biggest section that grew was the fitness-only sector, which also includes the low-budget clubs. If you take a look at the YMCAs and the nonprofits, they grew, but not by much. But health club members by clubs in 2016 in millions, fitness-only facilities were booming, particularly the Planet Fitnesses, right? So the question then comes to, well, that's not even, I guess a statement is this: we're getting squeezed from the bottom by the low-budget guys, right? And if you're a studio, you're getting also squeezed by the top, by the high-performing studio. So the question is, how do you really win? How do you, like, if there's all these people entering the market and there's more and more members that are joining, why aren't they joining your facility? Right? Because they weren't necessarily joining our facility. We had to figure stuff out. We had to really double, triple down on these guerrilla tactics sort of ways. And this is the way that I want you to really think about all the different things that we did and how to differentiate in our market. And none of this stuff really cost really a whole lot of money, but boy, when you combine it all, it really makes it very effective. But before I get into this, I think we all know this. We realize we're not in the fitness business. Like fitness is just, we have something in common. That's like the coffee shop isn't in the coffee business. Like, we don't go to the coffee shop to talk, you and I talked about this, yes? We don't go to the coffee shop to talk about coffee. If Mark and I go to the coffee shop, we talk about other things. So if we're going to open up a coffee shop, it needs to be a really cool coffee shop to come and hang out in. So the coffee shop is actually in a relationship business. So they're in a community sort of building business. Make sense? So the fitness business is not about fitness. Fitness business is about four things. It's about accountability. The fitness business is about coaching. That's what you have to triple, triple, quadruple down on. Accountability, coaching, relationship building, community building, that's the business. So if you think about guerrilla tactics, it's in those four areas is where you have to look for creative ways on how to build a better community, how to build better, stronger relationships. We did some really cool things. Like when John says, we knew that we needed to out-care the competition, but that's so broad. To me, I have to have a specific, actionable thing that I can do for me to show that I care, and this is what we did, okay? So I noticed that every year in our community, we had businesses where they were donating money to organizations like the Salvation Army. right? And so I noticed that, every year we did the same thing, but I also noticed that they were like, we weren't working together. So like if you have a business and you have a business, we're not actually talking to each other, but we're all working towards the same cause. And I thought that was very interesting. Why don't we come together for one noble cause? And no one has ever asked that question in our community. Right? So I started calling some of these businesses, hey, did you know that we also donated money to the Salvation Army? And Kenny would say, I had no idea. Well, gosh, let's work together. So don't wait once a year for around Christmas time to figure out a plan how to work with your local businesses. What I'm saying is look for ways to include local businesses for charitable work. Get the customers involved, much like you would get your members involved, they would get their patrons involved as well. What a wonderful way to come together for a community. One of the people that we're working with, he has a staff member whose sister is not doing well. She's got cancer, and so they need to raise money. So the whole community, this gym is getting the whole community to come together to raise money for his sister. How cool is that, right? Your culture, right, becomes a really massive, massive, massive differentiator in your market, as long as you understand that is a tactic that you have to spend time and money on. It's a book I'm reading right now, and this guy's talking about something interesting. He said, we always pay money, and you and I talked about this yesterday, we always pay money to gather leads. Right? We pay money for Facebook advertising. Okay, so how much money do you spend, though, currently, monthly, to keep the current clients? That's an interesting thought process. And so he says you should spend up to like $10 per client. And that's quite a bit of money, because if you have 100 clients times 10, that's $1,000 a month. But what if you only spent $300 a month? Imagine the kind of party you can put on for your clients for $300 a month. Think about that, right? And we'll talk about that more in a minute. Another tactic that we deployed, which was very, very effective, and this built interesting relationships with the team members inside of the gyms, and also an interesting relationship with our members and our clients, is pay it forwards. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a pay it forward. As a team, we would every meeting we would think of one individual that we want to go above and beyond for. In other words, the idea is to think of the individual when they least expect us to think of them. That's the idea. And we gave all of our clubs $50 a month to do it. It's not a whole lot of money. It's not about the money. Most of the time, it's a matter of time and energy and just the thought that I thought about you when you least expected me to think about it. So, for example, our trainers, they helped one of our clients bust up some concrete in her house. She was doing some remodeling. She didn't have a whole lot of money. And so there's 3 dudes. I think they spent like $25, $30 in supplies, went to her house, and for 3 hours, it's 9 hours worth of man labor, that they busted up her concrete, saved her a tremendous amount of money. And do you think that builds a relationship with that lady? Where is she going to go? Nothing, think about it, right? And that stuff compounds. You do that every single month with one member times 12 months times 5 years, right? That stuff comes back to you big time.
Mike,
right?
In regards to the pay it forwards, I think the most powerful thing we did with that was we would have our staff meeting every month, and we would make them present what they did.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't mention that. That's right. Every month, right? They are required to bring a story to our managers meeting where we would, and that took up almost like 2 hours of a meeting sometimes to go through these stories, but that's how important that was, right? Anyways, I can go on about those pay it forwards. I only have 36 minutes. I got to keep going. This one is really interesting. This one is one of my favorites. It's called Mustache. So Mustache is a obstacle course that we challenged our members to do, because normally very few people willingly will go and get muddy. All right? So you have to challenge your members to do it. And we actually did it as a part of a charity event. So the night before, we would raise money for Safe Passage, and then the next day, we would go and run a muddy race with our members. Now, here's what the race is not about. The race is not about how fast or how slow you go. That's not the purpose of the race. And the race is not about the race itself. Here's what the race is about. The race is about overcoming obstacles. There are 45 to 50 obstacles that every one of our clients and members have to overcome. It's like a metaphor for life, right? Think about the relationships that you build with your members and clients, helping them literally climb over a physical wall, or helping them get out of a muddy hole, right? You can't make that stuff up. And the stories that come out of that are really amazing. Mustache is about building confidence. How do you build confidence? Get something done. That's how you build confidence. And so we had a start date to train our people for the event. We typically start about 3 months or so out from the event, and we would train our clients physically and mentally. There's a start date and an end date, and when they finish the race and they completed the event, that builds people's confidence. Our mission statement as a franchise is to raise the self-esteem of the world, and to me, this is the living representation of why we do what we do, right? And Pay It Forwards, of course, are monthly representations of the things of why we do what we do, but Mustache is the biggest event of the year for us, or was the biggest event for us as an organization. Christmas parties are cool because it gives us an opportunity to interact with our people. That's how we are able to build relationships, right, with our people. And it sounds so simple, yeah, we get it, Mike, but when you have 160 people work for the company, like sometimes the only time you really get a chance to see them is during these sort of events. Remember, these are all tactics that you can do to make your company really, really fun company to be not only at work at, but too, when people come in and they see, of course, happy people, why wouldn't they want to associate with happy people? Think about that, right? And the Christmas parties weren't necessarily just about booze and listening to music and eating dinner. That was part of it. For us, it was an entertainment show for us, and we entertained them by giving them prizes at the door. We had photo booths. We had different themes. One thing I didn't mention, and maybe you guys already know this, but the fitness business is about entertaining in general. If I like the way that I feel when I come into your facility because I had fun, think about it. Wouldn't I come back on a regular basis? And the way that we coach training sessions, right, becomes an entertainment in of itself. But to us, Christmas parties are a way for us to entertain our people. I mean, we knew that if we do a good job with that and we take care of them, when they go back to the clubs, they'll do the same thing. Okay? I think I have a couple more. Yep. The after-hour events was actually John's idea. We made this deal once a month, and nobody had to come to this, but once a month we would bribe our team with really solid beer and high-quality food. And we put together a self-development sort of workshop, and nothing to do with the skill set that they would need to improve at work. It was more so about how to manage money, or how to retire a millionaire, for example, if you understand how retirement works, and that's more of John's area of expertise. I did a workshop on how to become indispensable, right? And all this does is gives your team the ability to learn, and it allows us to build the relationships with our team members and build a community within our company, right? And you can do the same thing with, of course, within your team, right? Constantly look for ways to develop your team. To us, we tripled down on all of these events. One thing I didn't mention, John does a very good job in putting together trips that we took with our team. Every 3 to 4 months, we would go on some sort of beer tour or some sort of wine tour. I know those things may sound a little cheesy, but nobody really got drunk. It wasn't a drunk fest. It was a way for us to get to know our team better. It was a way for us to build a community with our team, and we expected our team to do the same thing with our members and our clients, right? Because our members and our clients experienced monthly events that our team was supposed to put on, very similar to the things that we did with our team. Is this making sense, you guys? Double, triple down on some of this stuff. So from the results perspective, bottom line, we all get paid for done. I can have a lot of fun, that's great, but if I'm not progressing, I took that very, very seriously. Remember, we're in the accountability business, we're in the coaching business, and boy, when this Planet Fitness moved into one of our markets, I took that to the next level. And so here's what we did. So we implemented this system in our clubs where every 8 weeks, there's 6 fitness evaluations. Every 8 weeks, it's in a fitness evaluation week. Every single client gets assessed, and we assess them 3 different ways. We assess them mechanically, aesthetically, and we assess their performance. Okay? The reason why that's important is because most of your trainers don't have a clue whether or not the clients are actually progressing, because they never take the time to figure out how are you doing with that one thing you said you wanted to accomplish 8 weeks ago, 16 weeks ago. Does that make sense? I took it to the next level with evaluating the trainers based on the success rate of their clients. Because to me, that's a true measure on whether or not you're in a high-quality business. I don't give 2 loads how much you're renewing, how much you're selling. That's great. What's important to me is, are the people that we sold training to, are they actually tracking? Are they moving in the right direction? And literally, line by line, we would go with every single one of our clients, with one of our trainers, And if that was John, he would need to tell me if this person is not on track. Do you know that they're not on track? And if the answer is yes, what are you doing about it? Right? Because it's unacceptable for that person not to be tracking. Is this making sense? We copied our business against someone who does a really, really good job. And when I looked at that guy's fitness evaluations, 8, 9 out of 10 people in his system were tracking forward. Right? And in our system back then, it was only like maybe 5 or 6, so I knew we had a lot of work to do, and this is the way that we improved the results in the accountability part of our business. Doubled, tripled down on that. Showcasing before and after for all over your club and your social media. Like, how many low barrier offers do you see offered in your market? A lot? Yes? No? High barrier offers maybe even? So how do you get someone to pay attention to you? You got to showcase case studies after case studies after case studies after case studies, testimonials before and after. You got to flood it. You got to make it so convicting and so compelling and so convincing that people will say, you want people to say, oh my gosh, all I see is before and after photos from this particular studio. They must know what the heck they're doing. Does that make sense? And when it came to our before and after photos, we stopped to an extent marketing our facility as a 24-hour facility, state-of-the-art equipment, and the only thing we started marketing are before and after sort of stories. Not necessarily just weight loss stories, but stories in general. Here's a good trick, or here's a good tip. Have your trainers once a month bring you a testimony. Doesn't have to be weight loss testimony, just a testimony once a month. Whose life have we impacted once a month? Have them bring you a testimony. Give the trainer 4 or 5 questions that they would give to their client to answer so that the client knows what to write. And every 3 to 4 months, your trainers should bring you a before and after weight loss testimony. But that way, every month, you know you're gathering fresh stories that you can post on social media to convict and convince your audience that what you're doing is a good show. Okay? What you're running is a good show. We had a poster inside. This is so simple, but man, this got me more leads internally inside of our system than probably any other source. And it's so cheap to do, meaning the cost of the poster, that's about it. It's a big size poster. All it is, it says, in the last 8 weeks, our clients lost X amount of pounds, X amount of inches, and now that we have a body scanner at the club, now we can say gained X amount of skeletal muscle. Year to date, lost X amount of pounds, X amount of inches, and gained X amount of muscle. That's it. And so the idea is when you put that up in your club, and if I'm a member and I work out early in the morning, late at night, if I look at that, well, I look the same since I started working out. Maybe it makes sense for me to reach out to have a conversation with somebody. Does that make sense? Right? But even if they don't reach out right then and there, as long as you're doing a good job in following up and with emails and with social media advertising, at some point they will talk to you. Right? That's how marketing works. You guys know this. Moving along, showcase your search. So think of it from this perspective. Your prospects come into your facility and they have a problem, right, that they want to solve. Yes? And whether they know, and most of them doubt that they have what it takes per se, maybe to stick with it. Maybe you've tried things before it didn't work. We get all this, right? And then they come and meet you, and you're the guide. And as the guide, you're supposed to showcase authority. You're supposed to showcase sympathy or empathy. Does that make sense? One of the ways you showcase your authority on top of your endless amount of case studies is your education. To me, that is a massive, massive, massive differentiator, especially with the market in the way it is. Right? And I'm not talking being gaudy about it, but certainly put it up all over your wall. Somewhere in the club, showcasing all the different things that you've done in the education that you have. And remember, who's the hero? Are you the hero or is the client the hero? Correct. But as the guide, you better have some authority, and as the hero, I need to be able to trust you, and one of the ways I'll trust you is by me seeing on whether or not are you qualified to do your job. Does that make sense? It's very cool because in our marketplace, right, and when we had 20 of our clubs, if anyone were displaying this in a proper matter. So when people walked into our club and we would take them by the before and after wall, and we would take them by all the certifications and the education wall, it really convinces people that, man, these guys are good. And my job as a sales guy is to increase someone's sense of hope, right, that they can do this, and this is one of the ways to do it. Yes? Make sense? Very effective. Of course, use technology. apps, whatever the case is, but particularly technology to show your clients professionally the type of progress they're making. Have a nice chart, use Excel, whatever you got to do to show me very black and white, am I or am I not making progress, right? Most trainers won't take the time to do that. It's just they'll either say that they do or they'll write it on a sheet of paper. It's so lame, right? And so with all these body scanners now, though, it's a pretty cool thing to demonstrate to the client, hey, look at the amount of progress and the amount of changes that you're making. You guys with me on this? So think of these as the guerrilla tactics that John was talking about. The two big things that we did that really made a massive impact is Ageless Fitness and Corporate Fit Challenges. And I'll tell you, the biggest realization that I had in 2015 is this. I realized that our PT department was completely reactive to what happens at the front door. And I don't know why it took for Planet Fitness to move in for me to recognize that. But what I recognized is that PT guys weren't doing jack squat to generate revenue. The only people that were generating revenue were your membership guys. So I had to flip that mentality, and I had to give our guys two tools on how to do it, and this is what we figured out. So, Ageless Fitness. John, take us through Ageless Fitness.
Well, we're probably preaching to the choir. Let me give you that back there for just a second.
Yeah, all right, you're gonna go back to me.
We're probably preaching to the choir just a little bit with this group, but if you're not convicted on this market, let me just tell you a little bit about our experience with this and what we found with the research that we did and why we made some of the decisions. This is a chart that Ursa put together based on trends for how often or how many new people are joining health clubs based on stratification of their ages, right? So Ursa breaks it down into 18 to 34, under 18, 35 to 44, and so on. And if you look at this chart, the main people that we were historically marketing to were between the ages of 18 and 54. And there's no question, all of our marketing was really geared towards those people. If other people came in, God bless us. But what we found was, when we looked at this, at the stats, at the trends over time, is they were either decreasing or they were flatlining. But when we took a deeper look, guess what? There were three other groups that were growing, that were becoming more members of health clubs. And those were the people under 18, and then the cohorts from 55 to 64, and then 65 and up were joining fitness centers with a higher degree of regularity. So of course, for us, it's funny because we had seen Dan Ritchie speak at a conference, and it just went right over our head. We didn't pay any attention to it. And then a couple years later, after we had to start figuring out some stuff, we were like, hey, isn't there a way to start picking up some of this low-hanging fruit where people will actually pay us to help them? And we did all this different research. We tried to figure all this stuff out. And guess what? We had a club in, for instance, Newcastle, Indiana. You know how far Dan Ritchie was from Newcastle, Indiana? About 2 hours. We're like, we got a guy 2 hours that's doing consistently $60,000 to $70,000 a month in recurring revenue, and he only focuses on people over 50. So we're like, we got to go visit this guy, right?
West Lafayette, Indiana, not Newcastle.
From Newcastle, which was our club that's probably closest to him.
I'm sorry, yeah, I got you. Okay.
It's only 2 hours away.
Yes.
No, we were in Newcastle.
Yeah. So there's a book that I read which made me think about what John is talking. It's so interesting when you read different things and all of a sudden it just comes together in a form of a question. So here's a book. It's the book is called A More Beautiful Question by Warren Berger. And A More Beautiful Question is a question that challenges the status quo. It's really interesting. You guys know what Oscar Pistorius is? Remember how he used those U-shaped legs, right? So there's a guy by the name of Phoenix in the 1960s. He was an athlete. Something happened to him. One part of his leg got he had to get it amputated. So the doc walks in and gives him some sort of flimsy prosthetic, and Phoenix puts it on, takes a step, and he falls. And he says, "This is frustrating." And here's the question: how is it possible that we can put a man on the moon, but I don't have a prosthetic that works? And so that set him on a journey to create these U-shaped prosthetics that Oscar Pistorius ended up using in 2004 Olympics, right? So a beautiful question is a question that challenges status quo. We started asking ourselves the types of questions that helped us get the money, help us generate the money that we lost to these to Planet Fitnesses. And the question was, what are the two lowest hanging fruits that we're not picking because we think we're too busy, right? Or we think we're we might need to gain some new skills because we're not good at it yet. What are those two lowest hanging fruits? And Ageless Fitness and Corporate Fit Challenges were the two lowest hanging fruits. In other words, we weren't doing anything with people that were 55, 60 and up. We weren't doing anything we weren't experts essentially in working with those individuals. And no one in our town was an expert in prevention. Like no one in our town was an expert in corporate wellness. And so, like, why aren't we those particular? That's a great question. And so we found Dan Ritchie. And that's when, didn't we go see a guy that's doing something with, oh yeah, we did. And so come to find out, he's like 2.5 hours away, so we went visiting this club and we stomped upon Ageless Fitness. And then we started looking at the statistics, and this is interesting. If you guys take a look at this, right, as the older you get, you visit the club more frequently based on the statistics, right? And a magical thing about health clubs and usage is if you use the club, you're going to see results, which is great. And the older you get, right, the more likely you are to stay longer at the particular facility, which makes sense, right? Because the more you use it, and the more likely you're to stay because you probably like it, right? These individuals are very, very loyal, come to find out. That's what we learned about the 55, 60 and up crowd. And so, but here's some takeaways for those of you that are not doing Ageless Fitness that John's going to talk about.
Yeah, so, I mean, I know I might be preaching to the choir a little bit, but if you're on the fence about whether or not you should decide, and that's why you made the trip here, let me tell you what we discovered that we didn't know once we started working with this group. This one really got to me. They show up for appointments. How many times have we set appointments with people over and over and over again, and they never show up? Try to get a millennial to show up for an appointment without 18 text messages. It's very, very challenging. People, my father's age, when they set an appointment with you, it means something, and they will be there, right? And they will probably be there before you, right? Number two, they pay their bills on time. Who in the room wouldn't want to increase their collection percentage? Who wouldn't want to decrease their bad debt? Guess what we found when we worked with an older cohort? They actually paid their bills more often and on time. Number three, they refer their friends. It's a very social thing. And we find that people get results much better when they work out in groups, and this was a very social thing for them. And we got more referrals, a disproportionate number of referrals from working with this group than we did from working with those earlier cohorts. They have money. And I know if you've been to hear Dan or Cody talk, and they've talked about the economics of working with this age, with this cohort, you get this. It's about 25% of the population, but they control 75% of all the wealth in America, right? We had this idea before we really looked at the numbers that because based on the conclusions that we were drawing from the older people that we'd seen come into our clubs, well, they don't have money. Ask a 25-year-old trainer. They don't have any money. Yeah, actually they do. You're just not giving them a great reason to spend it with you. And then no one is marketing to this group in our towns. There was marketing that may touch on this group, but we found no one was marketing to this group. So that actually made a dollars and cents difference for us because if you guys have followed what's happening with the cost of clicks and the cost of leads, if you can find ways to market to groups that aren't getting marketed to, there's not as much competition, right, and it's cheaper to market to those groups than it is the more traditional groups that we've been marketing to. And Mike touched on this, and he showed the chart. They're extremely loyal. As a matter of fact, Dan once told me that he had data to support that if someone was a member of Miracles Fitness, he was more likely to lose them because they were deceased than to lose them to another fitness center, right? That's pretty amazing. They're not going to shop around once you build a relationship with them. We thought that was pretty powerful. So to look at our results, we watched Dan. We had him come out. He did some consulting with us. And just by running this program for about 8 or 9 months, but setting it up annualized in just a few of our clubs, 9 of our clubs, right? And then remember, we ended up selling our clubs. These are some of the stories, by the way, that enabled us to find an investor who was willing to pay a very attractive multiple for our club because we were telling these stories over and over again and showing them the growth opportunity in our business. So we did about $200,000 in EFT spread across annually. And the interesting thing was the group of people that we did this $200K in revenue from EFT, they wouldn't have qualified for the programming that we already had in place. It was too intense for them. And in some cases, the duration of our sessions was too long for them. So by introducing FAI and becoming functional aging specialists, we now had a new arrow in our quiver. And these folks, they were already members with our club, and we didn't connect with them initially because we didn't have the tools. And we would have never gotten these people because prior to this, we simply didn't have the program for them. I think this is you.
Yeah.
All right, so listen, that's the number one arrow in our quiver, and I know we want to have some time if there's any Q&A.
Yep.
So we got to cover Corporate Fit Challenge.
2 minutes. Yep. Corporate Fit Challenge. So this one might be new for most of you guys. Corporate Fit Challenge. Remember, here's the question that I asked myself. I couldn't answer, and then I found an answer. So the question is this: my teeth, if they don't feel good, I call a dentist. If my car breaks down, I go see a mechanic. And here's the question: when a company has a problem with the health of their organization, why don't they call the local prevention expert in town, which is you? That's a great question. Couldn't answer it. Started talking to my members, started talking to my clients, and come to find out the answer is actually really simple. They didn't know that we have this other thing called corporate wellness that we do. Like the only thing that they knew that we do is we sell memberships and personal training. They didn't actually know, oh, you guys also do corporate wellness. Well, as a matter of fact, we do. So instead of us trying to come up with something on our own, we're big fans of, we're not afraid of making mistakes. I mean, smart people learn from their mistakes. Wise people learn from other people's mistakes, right? So that's why, Dan, we're allowing Dan and Cody to kind of lead us and guide us in the Ageless Fitness world. And Trina Gray, she created a program called Corporate Fit Challenge. She's in a very small town in Alpena, Michigan, I believe, and this lady does $500,000 a year in Corporate Fit Challenge revenue. That's incredible. To me, that makes her an expert because she's able to produce some serious outcomes, right? So let me tell you a little bit about Corporate Fit Challenge. So Corporate Fit Challenge, what Trina says, your bread and butter are companies that employ 5 to 50 people. So think about, doctor offices or dentist offices, right? 5 to 50 people, that's your bread and butter. You'll land some companies that are 4, 5, 6, 700 people, but your bread and butter is 5 to 50. And what's interesting about these companies, they have a lot of interesting things in common. I'm going to put this all out there. One, when I started talking to these individuals, they really love their people. Like nobody wants to see their team do poorly. Right? They want to see their families do well. They want to see the productivity go. They're all good people. The other thing I noticed is that every single company that I spoke to either had no solution at all for prevention, right? Or they had some sort of a half-hearted attempt. And every year, their cost on healthcare claims increased. I thought that was very interesting. So they have a problem. They see the numbers, but they're doing nothing about it. This is a massive hole in your marketplace that someone should fill, and it needs to be you. But you have to you got to have the right approach. The other thing I found interesting is there's always typically some sort of out-of-shape HR lady that's trying to motivate other people to try to do something. And she's got no credibility, and nobody listens to her because she has a hard time getting started herself, or she has a hard time sticking with. So you guys, on the other hand, that's what you do for a living. Every day, what do? You get people started. You have that skill set to inspire someone to take action, and you also have a skill set to have someone keep going. Does that make sense? That makes you the experts in talking to your local companies about health and fitness. And the main thing I notice is they don't see you as a solution to their problem. And the reason, once again, they don't see you as a solution to their problem because they don't know that you have the solution. They know they have the problem. That makes sense? But they don't know that you have the solution. And they never connect it to. It's so interesting to me. Anyway, so our results with this, well, first of all, what is the Corporate Fit Challenge program? This is Trina Gray's way of showing you and telling you what the Corporate Fit Challenge program is. And it's a very simple approach, Corporate Fit Challenge, and you guys can read it. Okay? But let me tell you the results of the. Shannon, you want me to go back? Affordable, fun solution to an activity and poor eating habits. Okay. So here's the results. This is interesting. We didn't charge for Corporate Fit Challenge programs right away. In fact, I didn't really care that we did. I needed our people to get good at it, so this was our pitch to our local members and our clients, and we said, Ms. Jones, we're looking for 2 or 3 companies that would love to partake in a Corporate Fit Challenge program. We're looking to get some local testimonies, and we need 2 to 3 companies to partake. Are you brave enough to do it? Let me tell you about it. And we have a great relationship with our members and our clients, and we got a bunch of people to try it. So in total, once again, this is happening around the same time that the Functional Aging Institute or Ageless Fitness is happening. So we deployed this at about 9 of our clubs. This is about 12 months worth of data. So we had a total of 534 people go through the Corporate Fit Challenge. Remember, not everybody paid, but in upfront fees, we did collect some cash, about 16 grand. Of the 534, 338 finished, which is actually poor. The better we got in running these programs, we got almost 75 to 78% of the people that started to finish the program. And we also noticed, of course, if you pay for it, you're more likely to finish it. Interesting. Of the 338 that finished, 162 became members, which once again, that closing percentage should be really in the upper 60s, but once again, we weren't really good. We just introduced the play. And of the 162, 45 bought personal training. And that is a terrible closing percentage, but that's okay. Remember, what I want to say is this $245,000 in revenue that we generated from a program to offset the revenue that we lost to a low-cost competitor. So in total, this was the impact in 12 months between two of those programs. Think about that. Now, on top of that, remember, like as John was saying, the hit and runs, right? The little things that we just double, triple down on to make our business a more fun business to come to and work out. Okay. So that's our story. That's our shtick. What questions do you guys have for us? Yes, sir. You could. Yeah, that's one way to do it.
I mean, that's not, I mean, we did lots of different versions of it. But really, the challenge is just getting people in that same company to show up and work out together.
Yeah, so we did a Corporate Fit Challenge where we pinned up 2 schools up against each other. Right, so it's teachers of school A up against teachers of school B, right? And that was very fun. But the Corporate Fit...
That was in Miamisburg,
correct?
Right?
Yeah.
And that was actually one of the most successful.
Yeah.
We got recognized by the school district at their annual banquet for running this program inside the school district.
Here's what the numbers I don't have. Remember, these are just that was the direct effect. What I don't have is the ripple effect. I don't have the numbers for referrals that we got as a result of this. I don't have the numbers of the memberships that those people purchased and the PT revenue that we generate off of that. All right, it's really hard to track it all with 21 clubs. Yes, sir.
During that time, were people coming into your facility, or is this all outside of your facility?
So the Corporate Fit Challenges were done, like the actual training part of it was done at the club, right? So part of the Corporate Fit Challenge, it's 30 days essentially of unlimited personal training. This is, top, like a 40,000-foot view, sort of an explanation. And the training that was done at the club, that's one part of it. The biggest part of it is you use that as an opportunity to build a better organization for the organization that you're working with. Right? So there's the part of the Corporate Fit Challenge play is you do 3 workouts like in the park or in their parking lot. Just think about like a team building sort of activity, right? But the majority of the workouts, yes, are done inside the gym. What I loved about this, remember, my trainers, they were reactive to what happens at the front door. And for 15 years I've been operating, I never had a reason to challenge the status quo until I did, and I got sick. And so this was one of the ways that they could now become proactive, right? So what I loved about it, when people were coming into a facility, they were first interested in personal training and second in their membership, which is great. Because that's not typically the way that business works inside of gyms, right? They're first interested in a membership, and then they buy PT, right?
Yeah, no, we attended a conference, and we knew we needed to get creative. We attended a conference out in California, and it was all about training. It wasn't an Anytime Fitness deal, and a lot of times when you're part of a franchise, you get caught up in the only way to do things is what I'm being taught by my franchise coaches. And the truth is, the fitness business is so big out there, which is why a conference like this is so powerful. Because you're seeing so many speakers that you would never see at other conferences. So we attended this conference out in California, and we were asking ourselves, why is it that when people come into our business that we're making them go through this filter. Everyone has to, be a membership prospect. Everyone has to sign up for a membership, and then we're going to take them through a fitness consultation, and then we're going to pitch them personal training. When there's a whole army of coaches out there that are just taking people just directly, person on the street to new personal training client, and all of the other steps in the middle get skipped over. And really, we started asking ourselves another question: what is it that our competition won't do? What is it that these big box competitors won't do? You know what? They won't get educated about how to train that older cohort, and they won't go out and they build those relationships with the companies. They just simply won't do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. What else you guys got?
So, Mike, now that you've sold,
Yes, ma'am.
I had a question.
Oh, I guess.
Do you have any special insurance? I mean, other than the idea to have insurance to train corporate people in the parking lot?
Just, be smart, right? Have them sign off on a waiver, right? And make sure that they're working at their own risk, and before you take anyone through a workout, a proper personal training protocol would be and should be to screen the individual, of course, through their medical history. You screen them through some sort of a movement screening, and so when you're taking these people on the parking lot, per se, to go through, you already know really things about. But in addition to that, yes, I would absolutely have them sign on some sort of waiver release.
Well, listen, remember, Mike is go. I'm risk management guy, right? If there's ever any question, let me just be clear. If somebody's asking about insurance, don't even try.
Very good. All right, good point.
So the first thing we're doing is we're reaching out to our insurance guy and explaining exactly what it is that we're going to do, and we, if it's within the property of our shopping center for our particular insurance, they were covered. If we're doing it in a park, we required an extra waiver and a rider on our insurance, which really wasn't that expensive. But as the risk management guy, the most important thing is because remember this, and I used to have this conversation with Mike all the time. Like all this wonderful stuff that we're building, if we screw up one way and we get sued, like it all goes out the window. So.
No, and that's a good point, and I actually took that very seriously. Every year we update our clients' medical history per Qs. I don't know if you guys do that, but that's an important thing and a good routine to get into. In fact, maybe even every 6 months to update people's medical history per Q, and make sure you have a fresh one on your record. Did you have a question?
No, I was going to say, so you've sold all of your clubs, and you've still got, except for one, you still got the Anytime Fitness tattoo on your shoulder. What are you going to do?
There's many wonderful things that we can do. And I guess that's the ultimate question.
With the tattoo, what are you going to do?
Oh, with the tattoo, I'm going to do. Oh, never mind. I thought it was a different kind of question. I'm going to keep the tattoo, John.
God bless you. Me too, brother.
Dude, 17 years. If you guys have any more questions, we got 2.5 minutes. If not, you guys, thank you so much for coming. Our email addresses are on there. If you want the PowerPoint, let us know. Cool. Thanks, guys.